Hello, thank you. First, I'll start off with a song. Normally, you don't want to follow Dave Skoudas on these, but I'm not sure. Maybe this is the next group you don't want to follow. So. All right, so the renderings that you see over here is for a City of Boulder bridge replacement underpass project at 4 Mile Cannon Creek at 19th Street. And then here's another rendering that shows kind of the user's perspective of that particular underpass. Renderings like these can be pretty invaluable in really trying to convey the intent of a project to the public and really try to sell it to stakeholders. I'm confident that the design team for this project will be able to make this rendering become a reality. So here is an example of an underpass that looks fairly close to resembling that 19th Street underpass. This was an underpass that used to exist on Little Dry Creek. The flooding has since been corrected, but the sump pump at this facility actually became so cumbersome to maintain that eventually they just let it flood out. I would think that the original vision for this underpass probably more closely aligned with that previous rendering that you saw. So when I started the district roughly 3.5 years ago, I was handed two larger maintenance projects from my predecessor, Mr. David Skoudas. The two projects had aspects of kind of trying to correct drainage issues for major drainage-way underpasses within the City of Boulder. In addition to those two larger projects, I've seen multiple other issues for underpasses come across my desk. And so really my goal today is to try to share some quick takeaways and also really try to impart on the designers and the reviewers in the room the importance of kind of stepping back and taking a view at how those underpass facilities fit into the larger drainageway system, and then diving into the details to figure out how to make those facilities actually function. These facilities, they're very complex and they often come with compromises, and so ideally those compromises won't impact the long-term operation of them, and it's really that long-term operation and after-the-fact corrections can be very expensive. So here is an underpass at Rock Creek in 120th. This is a CDOT M&S standard box culvert that's been retrofitted to have the underpass component. The district removed 170 cubic yards of material from this site last year. Just up the street, we have a Coal Creek underpass. Removed 60 cubic yards of material from this site. Again, this is a retrofit situation that requires frequent maintenance to keep it just functioning. And then this is a Wonderland Creek underpass, and you can see that 7-foot clearance. Really, as a pedestrian on foot going through this underpass, it feels really almost cramped and almost a little creepy. And the bicyclists that go through this area, they typically would choose to just use the at-grade crossing. They won't go under the underpass. Would not compromise with clearance on underpass designs. Here is another Wonderland Creek underpass. This is included to remind me the importance of really coordinating with maintenance crews early and often in the design process. The trench drain that you can see just at the bottom of the photo at the entrance there was included specifically at the request of those maintenance crews. The crews in Boulder, they maintain and operate over 80 underpasses, and so they definitely know what works and does not work for them, so we should try to learn from their experiences. Now we'll dive a little more into the two larger projects. Definitely want to thank the City of Boulder for all their help on these two projects, as well as Jason Stosky and Mike Sarmento, who are the construction managers that worked with me on the project. So the Goose Creek project was designed by Respect, constructed by American West Construction, and then the Bear Canyon Creek project. I don't know why, but the Michael Baker sign is not showing up there, and it should. It did every other time. Michael Baker designed this project. North State Environmental constructed it. And then we also had the services of ERO Resources, Arrowhead, Arbor Force, and CMS to work on the project. So I was amazed at just how many people touch even these smaller maintenance projects. It definitely takes a team and that collaboration. So here's a photo of the Goose Creek underpass at BNSF. The original drainage improvements for this project were actually constructed in 1995. So over the years, multiple feet of sediment and just biomass from all the cattails had built up, and there had been other smaller maintenance efforts performed, but it became obvious that really a larger project was needed to get the flooding off of the regional trail in this area. Here's all the cattails that had overtaken the channel. And then this is a photo of the 4-foot grouted riprap drop structure at the very downstream end of the project reach. Fairly unique structure, and we definitely want to try to maintain the character of the structure with our improvements. On the lower left-hand side there, you can see a photo of the modification efforts for that drop structure. And if you look really closely, you can see kind of orange paint lines that indicates the adjustments that we were proposing to make to the crest of that drop structure. We ended up cutting down the invert elevation of that, or the crest elevation of that drop by 1.8 feet to steepen the upstream channel to be just over 0.5%. That was actually about double the original slope. And then on the right side, you can see some of the modification efforts and to really try to create a low flow channel again, try to concentrate those flows. And really the goal of our project was to concentrate those low flows and get those drool flows, if you want to go by Dave's presentation, to basically work to our benefit to kind of keep that channel flushing and clean on a day-to-day basis. To construct the project, we had to create a 900-foot long dewatering pipe around the project so we could actually construct it in somewhat dry conditions. I'm always amazed at how much thought and effort needs to go into planning for the dewatering of these projects, especially on a confined project like this one. Definitely appreciative of our contractors' skills in these areas. But of course, Mother Nature will always remind you who's boss. Our construction went a little bit too far into the spring, and we got overwhelmed. So I included this photo to try to convey just how much muck material we had to deal with on this particular project. At one point, we had about a 30-foot wide by 800-foot long river of muck that was on the order of 3 to 4 foot deep. And it seemed to be just self-replenishing. Like the loader would come in, he'd take a bucket and just slop in right behind him. So I can recall a conversation with Brian Schremeyer from American West during the design process where he tried to flag for me just how difficult it could be to manage some of this muck material. And in hindsight, I didn't do enough to really collaborate with our design team to talk that through and to figure out if maybe there's an alternative way to configure the project or work with that material. And it really was a problem. And so it's a lesson learned for me that I definitely need to make better use of our project partners process. So this photo was also included because this is pretty much what our site looked like when the COVID restrictions were first hitting and really the world was coming to a stop. So I do want to recognize American West Construction as well as North State Environmental, who was the contractor for the other Bear Canyon Creek project, for just their efforts to keep construction moving. I can't imagine having to stop working on this project, especially in this condition. So definitely appreciative of them. And I know that their crews had to make some personal sacrifices just to keep working during COVID. I'm sure the rest of the project partners did as well, so I'm very appreciative of them. Thank you. So here's your before and after. You can see in the after you have the low flows, the channel is kind of clear, and those flows are working for us. And then this is a photo of the actual underpass. There was a 2-foot existing drop structure at this location that was completely buried. We didn't even know if it was still there. After removing most of the sediment, we used this back truck to kind of get the final portion out to inspect the basin of that existing drop structure, make sure it's still in good shape. Fortunately, it was. So for lessons learned, we think we found the right combination of kind of a steeper channel slope and more confined low flow channel to make those flows work to our benefit. Hopefully we'll get another 25 plus years out of these channel improvements. This particular project impacted about 800 linear foot of channel, and it cost just under $500,000. And that does include some significant cost overruns due to the never-ending muck conditions that we experienced. After the project, we were able to keep that trail perched above the 2-year storm elevation, so maybe more separation might be warranted in certain circumstances. All right, so Bear Canyon Creek project, the top right photo there, you can see kind of a gray stop log looking object posted right above that flood wall. That flood wall is actually a weir that's meant to release the 100-year flows out of the pedestrian underpass and into the downstream channel. But unfortunately, the open water you see on the left-hand side there was kind of frequently backing up and spilling into the underpass, and that happened so frequently that the maintenance crews decided the stop log was necessary just to keep the underpass functioning for day-to-day trail users. So this is a profile that was generated during the alternative analysis phase. Please pay attention to the kind of the jagged blue line that represents the existing channel thalweg. You'll notice that the channel 800 feet downstream of the Arapahoe Avenue culverts was actually 1 foot higher in elevation than the inverted elevation of the culverts. So essentially we had an 800 foot long pond or a reverse channel slope that was not good for the function of this particular facility. That was not the intent of the area. The image on the right is an aerial of the project site. And you'll see that call out for those trees. Those trees are actually some cracked willows that you see off to the left there that had begun to kind of fall apart and clog up the channel. And that was actually that point 800 feet downstream. That was the high point that was creating our pond. And the other main issue we had to deal with was this big wetland area. Essentially the whole field was wetlands, and so we need to try to preserve those wetlands as much as possible. To accomplish the goals, we decided we'd just trailblaze a new section of channel around the grove of trees and through the open field. But we'd also manipulated the channel profile so that we'd eliminated that pond, which would allow us to basically pass the 2-year storm through the Arapahoe culverts without inundating that Arapahoe underpass. But then we attempted to kind of play with the profile just enough that we wouldn't actually drain those wetlands out and lower the groundwater conditions for them. So the open field that the new channel was going through was actually just completely full of weeds. The photo on the right there shows Marianne Gialetto from OSMP and the City of Boulder walking through the weeds, and really the entire field was about 3 to 4 foot tall and just not nice conditions. So we really knew that we were going to have our hands full with kind of the re-veg process following the project. On the left, you can see the results of a test hole that Joe Kuchenmeister from Michael Baker had dug to just inspect the substrate conditions, and with that we found that we had about 18 inches of topsoil on the site, which is somewhat unusual, and so we decided we'd actually just take the top 6 to 9 inches of topsoil and strip it off and export it off the site, and with that we're taking hopefully the majority of that seabed of weeds off the site as well. So lesson there is really just look into your topsoil conditions and see what you have. So here's a photo of the construction process taken from the downstream end of the project, looking back up at that grove of trees. You'll notice off to the left that the new channel is being constructed in relatively dry conditions, while the historic flows or the low flows are being maintained in the historic channel. I found the comparison of the dewatering approaches for these two projects to be very interesting. The Goose Creek project, which happened in a much more urban and constrained environment, the dewatering costs for that project were over 3 times more expensive than the open space project for the Bear Canyon Creek. So this is just it's an example of where if open space is set aside, you definitely are able to stretch your tax dollars much further. Have a lot more options. Just some photos of the construction process. On the lower left-hand side there are our use of mud mats, and so these are essentially just reusable wooden beams that you place to put construction traffic over, and we use them to bridge ourselves essentially over the poor wetland soils. I was impressed by this product because I thought we had less of an impact on our project site by using them. The top left photo is just some of the trees that we harvested for use in our in-stream structures. This is not a heavily treed section of creek, and so it was a challenge to find adequately sized material. And then top right photo there is the beginnings of a rock J-hook structure. We were actually able to have a little bit of fun on this particular project and implement some many natural channel design elements along the entire project reach. So with that, we had the goals of creating more habitat for the project and also dissipating energy across the entire length of the project. And then the bottom right photo is just really the impacts of the project. That pond is now gone, and we were able to lower the water surface just upstream of our project improvements by over 2 feet. And so really that's the main improvement in the area of the underpass, but is lowering that water surface. So for lessons learned, again, trying to put those low flows to work for us. That's the benefit for the project. The reverse channel slope near the underpass was not working, and the fact that really the problem for the underpass was 800 feet away really shows to me the importance of taking the opportunity to step back and figure the larger system prior to diving into those maintenance details. We're currently in year 1 of the re-veg process, and it's clear that weed management is going to be an ongoing issue, but I'm still confident that just exporting that top 6 inches of topsoil off the site was a good idea. And then preservation of open space definitely pays off. This particular project cost just over $500,000, and we were able to impact about 1,500 linear feet of channel. So on a linear foot cost, or per linear foot cost, this project was much cheaper to construct. And then the climb to safety. I didn't know that the district actually was in the business of selling signs, but we will offer these climb to safety signs for free to local governments. So basically, we'll give you the signs, you install them in your underpasses, and then your community can get CRS credits for the effort. So there's my final lesson learned. Thank you.